So now the value of that evidence has gone from way down here to way up here because you immediately are finding out about email accounts, hard drives that are up in the sky, social networking sites. And so now that combined with the fact that you're constantly communicating and collaborating with law enforcement and the prosecutors as you find information, the value of digital evidence skyrockets. And what we have found is that the more collaboration and communication that you have as you're finding evidence on that hard drive, the quicker you can either get a confession from the criminal or they will agree to plead guilty rather than go to court. So that's the phased approach and triage, and also you got to have that investigative mindset. But most importantly, it's how fast do you collaborate? How quickly are you talking to each other? Because the idea about an investigation is you shouldn't do the entire investigation and never talk to the prosecutor until you're completely done and then show the prosecutor what you've got, because what if you forgot to do something, or what if you spent 30 days doing something that she doesn't care about or he doesn't care about? You've wasted valuable time. So we're overwhelmed, as we've said, with digital evidence. I mean, we're absolutely overwhelmed with digital evidence. And one of the problems that we're having is that our law enforcement, our forensic examiners, they're being taught how to use the forensic tool, but they're not being taught the forensic methodology. The process is the methodology that you investigate something with is much more important than just understanding how the tool works. It's like I know how to use a hammer to nail a nail in a piece of wood. That's a lot different than knowing the process of building a house. Because anybody can nail a nail in a piece of wood, but not everybody can build a house that will stand up. So we have to start thinking about the methodology, not just how to use the tool. I was reading a book earlier this year from Jonathan Lairs. It's called How We Decide. And one of the things that he had said in his book was, when we are faced with an overwhelming amount of information, we don't make good decisions. If we get too much information, sometimes we call that information overload, we don't make a good decision because we're thinking about too many different pieces. Well, that's what's happening in our law enforcement when we're looking at hard drives. Remember, I told you the hard drives are getting bigger and bigger. There's a lot more information on them. And so law enforcement is looking at the hard drive and they go, where do I start? I mean, there's information here, there's information there. It's all over the place. So what we have to do is get back to the basics of criminal investigations and law enforcement. And that the basics of investigations and evidence is back with Edmund Lockhart's evidence transfer principle. Now, this is way back, but Edmund Lockhart, he says that anytime two items come in contact with each other, there is a transfer of evidence. So when I walked out of my hotel room this morning, on my shoes or my jacket, I probably carried with me a piece of fiber from the bed sheet or the closet or something, and I left it somewhere in here. And when I go back tonight, I will no doubt take a piece of fiber from the carpet or hair or something to that extent, and it will be transferred to my hotel room. That's the evidence transfer theory. Now, if we think about that when we talk about computer forensics, now all of a sudden we start thinking in a totally different way about the computer. For instance, this is a diagram that I made about the file times. These are the names and times of the files that are changed when you save a document. So what happened here, up here at the very top of this blue, what I did was I created a Word document and I clicked Save. When I click Save, just one document, and click Save, here's what happened. All these files in green on the left, these are all the files that their times were modified. All the files on the right in yellow, these are all the files that their access times were changed, the last access. And these 3 red files, these were 3 files that were created when I saved one document. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, if I created one document, how did it create 3 files? That's understanding how a computer works, because it's not just creating the file that you think you're creating. There are other files inside the operating system that it is also creating. And it is just this type of forensic evidence that helps us find when a person is trying to create fake evidence or plant evidence on a computer, or when they're deleting, they're trying to get rid of all their forensic evidence. The way that we find that they got rid of it is by understanding this process of what files are being touched and created when they take action. And I'm gonna talk about a couple of those. This right here, this is on our website. This is a forensics methodology flowchart. There is a link, I think, in your book. Yes, there's a link in your book after these slides that show you where you can download this chart, and it prints out into a big piece of paper. But it talks about the 3 phases of any forensic exam. There's the preparation and extraction phase, the identification phase, that's where you're going through looking for items of evidence about your particular crime. And then the most important phase, and the phase that is so often forgotten that we don't do well, is the analysis phase. After you find an item of evidence on the computer, whether it's a picture of pornography or whether it is a letter of all the details about committing the terrorist act, you need to go further. You need to say, okay, well, who created that letter? Where was it created? When was it created? How did it get on the computer? What else happened to it? So this forensics methodology lays all that out, that whole process. And of course, it talks about the return on investment. And the return on investment is, and this is an issue that a lot of forensics people will have problems with. Most forensics people that you talk to, they don't want another forensic examiner looking at the evidence after they've looked at it. The reason why is there's so much information on a hard drive, on a computer, that you can never find all of it, 100% of it. It's just like when you're investigating something in the real world. You can always ask one more witness, what did you see? You can always ask one more person and find somebody else to say, oh yeah, I heard something or I saw something. But you can never find everybody that ever heard or saw anything about it. So everybody's always worried, well, how do I know that I found all the evidence that's there to be found? On a computer, you can never find it all. You can only find enough that your prosecutor agrees, okay, you found enough that we can go to trial with it. Enough is enough, right? If you found a good example that we use in the United States on child pornography is, if you found 1,000 pictures of child pornography, will it make any difference if you found 5 more pictures? Will he go to jail any longer for 5 more pictures after you've already found 1,000, or 10,000 pictures, right? So enough is enough. Oh, so that's the link to where you can find it. The other thing, and wow, that didn't come out very well. So this is not part. Let me just move past that because that doesn't show up well. So by thinking of Lockhart's principle of evidence transfer and what files are created when you take actions on a computer, you can actually find these road signs. So it's just like you're driving down the road and they have big signs that tell you, exit here for the forensic evidence. Here's where you'll find the forensic evidence of what they did. And again, that has to be fast. The other thing that we wanted to talk about is the thing that we hate the most about computer forensics, and that is the report writing. When you're doing the written report, that forensics report for? That's a big question that you have to ask yourself. Because a lot of forensic examiners, law enforcement, they think that they're writing the report for themselves. And so they write it in this technical language that nobody can understand. I don't know if they want people to think that they're smarter or what, but they'll do things like this. Take a look at this, and I'm going to challenge. Here comes a real challenge for our translators. Bless your heart if you can hang on to this. What does this mean? I'm writing a binary flag spawning from the root of the operating system to function as a static storage platform for non-system data. What does that mean? That is a very long, complicated way of saying I created a directory. I created a folder to put stuff in. But our forensic examiners will write something like this instead of something like this. And so what we say is, you've got to realize that forensic examiner back in the lab, we know he's really smart, but when he's sitting back in the lab with his big smart head, he needs to think about, who am I writing that forensics report for? He needs to write that forensics report in a way that that police officer or that investigator can understand it. Because if that police officer can't understand it, then they're not going to be able to explain it to the prosecutor. And if the prosecutor can't understand it in the United States, they're not going to be able to explain it to a jury of 12 people. So that's kind of our process. The nice way of saying, we've got to make our reports where they make sense. And if that looked like anybody in particular, I apologize. It wasn't supposed to. But the other thing is, a lot of times, pictures are better than words. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you create a timeline of what happened on that computer, a lot of times that makes a lot more sense than a bunch of paragraphs about what happened. For instance, I could show you this timeline and say, okay, here's this person where they were doing an online chat about kidnapping somebody, and then they went to the internet and they did Google searches for date rape drug, and then they met at the Exxon gas station prior to committing the crime, then they kidnapped the person, and I could tell you this whole story with a timeline, and it makes so much more sense to the prosecutor and to the judge and the jury that's going to be listening to this. Or I could give them a big binder full of words, and it's not going to make any sense at all to them. You know, we have found that the more people understand, the easier it is to get your confession or conviction. Now, the future of forensics. Here's, if I can help at all save you time and money by not repeating the same mistakes that we have made, and where we realize that forensics is going, the future of forensics is not in individual people in labs. When you put an individual person at each police station that knows how to do forensics, it's actually less effective than if you put them all together or group them in larger groups. Because what happens is all these techies get together, and when they're all sitting in the same room together, they share information, they share their knowledge. And if I don't know how to do something, or I have a question when I'm doing a forensic exam, I can look up, and one of my other forensic examiners is right there, and she may know how to do it, or he may know how to do it. So that centralized and regionalized lab approach is absolutely, it's kind of the brain trust. You can send something there, and somebody there will know how to do all of it, right? Not to mention you're leveraging processing power of all the different computers. The other thing is, as we said, a collaborative approach. Now, this collaborative approach is not just between law enforcement, it's between law enforcement, the forensic examiner, and the prosecutor, right? As a prosecutive